Kyiv under heavy fire of ballistic missiles after a public insult of Putin on Twitter. North Korean forces are very vulnerable but still manage to help Russia's advance. These topics and more in today's episode. My name is Pavlo Shtermach. Let's go. Kyiv suffered from heavy strikes by Iskander ballistic missiles. The Toronto Business Center as well as St. Nicholas Catholic Church suffered from the rubble falling. One person is reported to have been killed, with at least a dozen people being wounded. What an adult behavior from the invaders' army to fire missiles after public insults and not care for real security and stability of their own state. Earlier, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy responded on Twitter to Putin's indirect line with proposal to conduct a technology duel firing intercontinental and middle-range ballistic missiles over densely populated cities of Ukraine, calling the dictator of Russia, I quote, a dumbass. It seems that this insult has hit Russians deeply as they launched deficit ballistic missiles against the center of Kyiv and the region that very night. Zelenskyy also commented on the 2022 Istanbul negotiations between Ukraine and Russia and Putin's peace proposal back then, dismissing them as sham. He simply offered Ukraine to surrender, freeze the conflict, shift allegiance to Russia, and give up our independence, Zelenskyy said. This person calls these some kind of agreements. He's just an old fantasist living in his own aquarium. End of quote.
People are dying, and he thinks it's interesting. Dumbass. Volodymyr Zelenskyy on X social network in response to Putin's proposal of a tech duel with missiles over populated areas.
Russia attacked the capital with 5 ballistic missiles of Iskander-M and North Korean Ki-23 models, the Air Force said. All 5 missiles were reportedly shot down, with debris falling in several districts of the city. 1 person was killed and 10 injured, 6 of whom were hospitalized, the Kyiv City Military Administration reported. In the Holosyevsky district, the missile wreckage damaged at least 2 office buildings, a gas pipe and 5 cars. A fire broke out on the roof of one of the office buildings, and the 15th floor was damaged, possibly trapping people inside, authorities said. A blast wave damaged the stained glass windows of the St. Nicholas Roman Catholic Cathedral in the Pechersk district, the Ukraine International Institute of Restoration said, with further details on the damage to follow. North Korean troops appeared to be extremely vulnerable to drones and cluster munitions, taking heavy losses but still managing to help Russia advance a few kilometers into Ukraine-controlled Kursk Oblast of Russia. This is according to open-source Intel Analytics. North Korean troops are reportedly operating alongside Russian paratroopers in efforts to retake Ukrainian positions in Kursk Oblast, a Ukrainian official told the Kyiv Independent publication. Each North Korean platoon is said to accompany a larger Russian company, with Russia allegedly paying over $2,000 per soldier for their deployment. The exact distribution of these funds between individual soldiers and the Pyongyang government remains unclear. The official also suggested that Moscow may transfer military technologies to North Korea, enhancing Pyongyang's weapons capabilities. North Korea is already using insights gained from observing Russian ballistic missile deployments in Ukraine to improve their own missile systems, further solidifying ties between the two nations.
It'll be important to see whether this North Korean contingent is the beginning of the end of the North Korean deployment, or if it's the prelude to a larger and more steady stream of troops. At this rate, seeing how badly the latest round of Russian offensives went in November, I think a lot will now depend on how well the North Koreans will perform, if they can tip the scales. North Korean troops certainly change up the game now that they are using different tactics to what the Ukrainians are used to, and they will bring the numbers. Pasi Paroinen, Finland-based OSINT researcher in a comment for Kyiv Independent publication.
The experience of Ukrainian soldiers in Kursk Oblast vary. Some say that North Korean soldiers are easy targets and cannot pose a serious threat to them. Others claim that they are well protected by Russian jamming systems against drones and are accompanied by elite Russian paratrooper corps, well, what remains of them, into battle. So we can make only one assumption from this information: the North Korean involvement and level of combat readiness differs radically. And today we'll talk to James Sher, Honorary Fellow of the International Center for Defense and Security in Tallinn. Greetings, Mr. Sher.
Greetings to you.
It is a pleasure to see you in our studio, and lately there have been talks about two major topics. The first one is North Korean deployments in Kursk Oblast of Russia and the quality of those soldiers, their mere presence as a third party of this war, and the possibility of European, we're not talking about NATO or European Union, just peacekeepers from European countries in Ukraine. What can you say me about those two topics?
First, about North Korea, there are several things to be said. First, obviously, this is very useful to Russia, which is like Ukraine, but in a different way, under considerable and growing pressure when it comes to manpower. The North Korean troops are in very stereotyped terms, extremely well trained. They are very fit physically, far better than the average Russian troops, but they are not a game changer in battlefield terms for all kinds of reasons. Tactical operational culture, language, command culture, all of these things. But the key point about them, if we look at this in the broader context, is that they should be a game changer for the United States. And it is very puzzling to me, and not only to me, that they don't appear to be, that the presence of North Korean troops fighting a war in Europe, even in the European part of Russia, is not seen as a dramatically unacceptable development in the United States, at least not yet. The Republican chairman of the House of Representatives Intelligence Committee wrote a letter to Biden in which he highlighted what a significant departure this was, what a significant red line has been crossed, and how it was absolutely urgent for the United States to take immediate action. And he even called for a closed session of the committee with President Biden. Of course, this has not happened. But one of the key reasons why the United States ought to be very interested is that obviously Russia has given North Korea something in return, and a considerable amount in return. They are giving them enormous technological assistance, particularly with their nuclear program, and that changes, that adds to all of the tensions and threats that are developing in the Far East, in the East and South China Seas. So that is the main reason why their presence is so important.
So you're telling me that the deployment of these trained troops, effective or not as they can be, threatens United States interests both in Europe and in the Far East. Am I correct?
Absolutely. And this is, as I said, been said by leading Republican members of the U.S. Congress. I haven't heard President-elect Trump yet say anything about this, but the Biden administration has been very keen not to express its views, whatever they are, not to express them publicly. And I'm not the only person who finds this puzzling. So my own belief is that their departure from the entire theater of war, if not from European Russia altogether, should be made a precondition for negotiations of any kind. If you had told either President Truman or President Eisenhower that 70 years later, after the end to hostilities in the Korean War, that North Korean troops would be fighting a war in Europe, they would have jumped out of their graves.
Well, there's Chinese troops stationed in Belarus. They've been there lately for drills with Russia and Belarusian army. Can you see European armies stationed in Ukraine?
Well, this is a much bigger question. Now, of course, President Zelenskyy just had meetings with the EU, with a number of key European leaders, a number of those who are most strongly supportive of Ukraine. Of course, he does not confide in me personally, but it is also, even if he did, it would be very early to know what his response to this meeting is. But on the basis of what I have read, I find it very disappointing, because one of the clear messages that seems to have emerged is that in the absence of the United States, it is not realistic, and it is not, for all intents and purposes, possible for Europe for European NATO allies to directly intervene in the war in Ukraine itself. So that is to say that what is basically being said is that in the absence of US participation, when NATO speaks about defense security guarantees, they are not speaking about proper defense guarantees. That is to say, a guarantee, a treaty to go to the defense of the country concerned, to go to Ukraine's defense. They're talking about assurances. So what are they talking about? Bucharest Memorandum bis in different variations. We know this is completely inadequate. And this is why Zelenskyy himself has said that nothing less will do than a guarantee from the United States. Well, it shouldn't be this way, because the starting point of realism in Europe has to be that we cannot count on the United States to be present anymore. We must do things ourselves. And a coalition of the willing, one of the urgent tasks it has, of several states that would make up this coalition of the willing, a number of them, including Estonia, incidentally, is that they devise practical measures to assist Ukraine directly with all the risks, even in the absence of United States participation, which incidentally would be a major source of leverage on the United States, which the United States might welcome. They might or might not. But we need to do this in the West's interest and in Europe's interest, not only in Ukraine's interest. And of course, that means taking risks. And if we say, as we do all the time, that if Ukraine is defeated by Russia, and defeated and dismantled and destroyed by Russia, the risks to Europe will be greater than if we do what is necessary to defeat Russia, then we're contradicting ourselves if we don't put ourselves in a position to support Ukraine directly, even in the absence of the United States.
Well, that is strange to say the least, because the combined economy of the European Union and United Kingdom are several times more than the GDP of Russia, because European economies are centered on cooperation, on capital, on producing some goods for life and for people, while Russia has been building its entire economy on military, not defensive military, but as we can see, on offensive technologies. Maybe it is the key and the time for Europe to centralize at least part of its economy on defense for itself. Do you mean that by saying that we should not rely on...
What you are saying just underscores a basic truth, that wars are not won decided by GDP ratios. Wars are decided by the conversion of national attributes, technological, economic, social, psychological, and military into usable military power. That's what decides wars. And it is understood by the majority of countries in NATO that this is true. But it is also understood that, as you say, our economic activity, our societies, our political systems have been orientated for generations in a profoundly different direction. And this, of course, cannot be changed tomorrow, but it requires a systematic approach, and it requires real steps. Now, there are real steps that have been taken in certain places, and it's not only in the Baltic area. Denmark, for example, only 8 months ago, appreciably increased its defense budget. Now they have ripped up this budget because they have rightly concluded it's inadequate, and they are going to produce something that is more ambitious and more adequate. We all need to go through this. This requires leadership. It requires understanding, because it means that the alternative priorities of the majority of ordinary citizens and voters are not going to be addressed in the way they want. We have extraordinary welfare systems in Europe, as you probably know. I think if you look at social welfare expenditures in the world, something like 70% of that is Europe. We are not thinking collectively here in pre-war terms. And we are in a pre-war period. We have to understand this. The chief of the British Defense Staff, more than a year ago, said, we are in a pre-war period. Well, he understands that. I understand that. Many Ukrainians who understand it, Estonians do. But how many people who really matter, who have the capacity to make decisions, really understand that? And of those, how many are prepared to take the risks and do the practical things to consistent with that understanding? Well, I'm afraid today it is still a distinct, if not a small, minority of people. So I doubt very much if President Zelenskyy was really pleased by what he heard in Brussels.
Well, I see two approaches in European countries during the elections. Part of the countries will vote for candidates that promise preparation for future possible war and preparation for defense. Like in Germany, we see the pre-election campaign of the future chancellors, and the situation like in Romania, where people vote for the candidate that promises peace with Russia rather than preparing for war with Russia. Who will win, in your opinion? That will be my finalizing question.
It depends on the country concerned, but of course the West is not one. The West is many. For all the reasons you mentioned, including the last one, you can see why the state leadership of Russia is so confident that they are winning this war, and in fact confident that they are now coming to the end of it. The question is, and we don't know this, and I don't think the Russians know this, what will Donald Trump do? Donald Trump believes he can end this war soon. Even if he's not so silly to believe he can end it in 24 hours, he believes he can end it soon. No, he cannot. There is an absolute certainty that he could not. If for no other reason than Putin has no interest in ending it. Fighting is the only leverage Russia has over Ukraine and over Europe as a whole. And Russia has no interest in a ceasefire except one which in advance concedes its terms, which would be completely unacceptable. So we have mutually opposed interests, antagonistic interests. The question is, when will Donald Trump understand this himself? I don't have the answer to that, but he's going to run into difficulties very early. What will he conclude and what will he do? Will he then understand what he should, that the problem when it comes to ceasefires and negotiations and peace is Russia, not Ukraine? Will he or will he not understand that? And if he does understand that, what will he do? Will he decide to give Ukraine everything it needs? It's possible, he's hinted at that, but it's also possible he will walk away entirely. Today, we simply don't know. We need to be honest with ourselves about this.
Well, let us hope for the better for the sake of Europe, Estonia, Ukraine, and United Kingdom too. Thank you very much, Mr. Sher, for being with us in this studio today.
Thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity, and best of luck to you. Slava Ukraini.
Heroям slava. Thank you again. And that seems to be it for today. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel, hit that notification button down below to help us deliver the news of the free world directly from Ukraine. Stay safe and don't let propaganda win.